Hamburgers may not be the food that springs to mind when you think of a heart-healthy diet. After all, for years, we've been told eating saturated fat, the kind found in red meat, causes heart disease, despite the fact that humans have eaten meat for thousands of years. Yet, heart disease has only been a major concern in the last century. So what's the deal with eating red meat? Does it make heart disease worse? Or could it help prevent heart attacks? In this video, we're going to explore the truth about red meat consumption. We'll also reveal a critical antioxidant for heart health that's found only in meat. You'll want to make sure you're getting enough of this one. Plus, we reveal 4 big mistakes people make when eating meat. But before we jump in, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We've got amazing new content each week. Now let's explore the facts on red meat. Firstly, if we look at the diet our ancestors ate, for the most part it was rich in foods such as eggs, butter and meat. These are foods that are high in cholesterol and saturated fat, and yet heart attacks were rare until the past 100 years. When we eat saturated fat, typically we see a rise in the total amount of LDL cholesterol in the blood. However, some experts now say the risk for heart disease hasn't increased as a result of this, because the kind of LDL cholesterol created after eating saturated fat is large in size and buoyant, opposed to smaller, more dense LDL. Why does this even matter? Isn't any increase in cholesterol bad for heart attacks? These same experts claim there is a body of evidence for it that shows small, dense LDL is what's dangerous for blocked arteries, leading to heart attacks, whereas large, buoyant LDL is not. In fact, some evidence suggests the risk is 3 times greater with small, dense LDL. They also claim that the real risk is the amount of triglycerides compared to the amount of HDL cholesterol in the blood, known as the triglyceride to HDL ratio. The higher the ratio, the higher the risk for heart attacks. Having high triglycerides and low HDL is what drives this ratio in the wrong direction. And typically when this happens, small, dense LDL cholesterol goes along with it. If you're interested in knowing how you can find out the size of your LDL cholesterol, it's done using a test called NMR or Cardio IQ. So what's this got to do with eating burgers? Well, saturated fat, the kind found in beef burgers, has the effect of causing the body to create large LDL particles and drives triglycerides down and HDL up. In other words, moving the blood markers in the right direction. However, a low-fat, high-carb diet has the opposite effect. A large study published in the American Heart Journal looked at 136,905 hospitalizations due to heart disease and confirmed this, showing the real risk was patients with high triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol levels. There are cultures around the world today that support these findings, who eat high amounts of saturated fat and yet have low levels of heart disease. 2 of note are the Inuits and the Maasai. The Inuit, who eat a traditional diet consisting of almost 90% of their calories from fat, have much lower rates of heart disease than those of the average American. Similarly, the Maasai tribal people in Kenya consume copious amounts of fat from meat and milk but have virtually no heart disease. So how about in Western countries? Have studies indicated that saturated fat consumption plays a role in heart disease? Interestingly, the science suggests that saturated fat doesn't necessarily contribute to heart disease. For example, a 2016 review that analyzed many studies found that the higher the saturated fat intake, the lower the risk of stroke. Now let's look at 2 further studies which show that low-fat diets don't reduce your risk of heart attacks. First off is a study called PREDIMED. Researchers gave 7,000 participants olive oil, which contains 20% saturated fat, or nuts versus a low-fat diet. Interestingly, this study was halted. You may be wondering why. Were the people following the high-fat diet dropping like flies? No. In fact, the study was stopped because the people following the low-fat diet were dying. Pretty shocking, right? Now I'd like to draw your attention to a study that was conducted over a 40-year period. This study was never published, most likely because it contradicted the mainstream advice to eat a low-fat diet and that our fat intake should come from polyunsaturated fats, the kind found in plants. In this study, the researchers studied 9,000 patients in mental hospitals. They fed one group a diet high in saturated fat, and the other group, a diet high in polyunsaturated fat from corn oil. Can you guess what happened? The group who ate the corn oil had a higher mortality and heart attack rate, even though they had lower levels of cholesterol. Another study done in 1965 looked at replacing animal fat in the diet with corn oil for 2 years. The researchers wanted to see if this helped lower cholesterol. And in fact it did, by 23 milligrams per deciliter. But did this reduce the risk of heart disease? The resounding answer was a big no. In fact, their risk of cardiac and total mortality was quadrupled. Did you hear that? By replacing animal fat with vegetable fat, their risk of death was 4 times greater. Thus suggesting animal or saturated fat consumption may not be as bad as we once thought. In fact, some experts argue that eating animal products plays a key role in cardiovascular well-being. And we're about to discover 3 essential nutrients that are only found in meat and animal products. Now let's look at some of the reasons red meat could be good for heart health. Firstly, red meat contains nutrients that aren't found in significant amounts in plant foods. For example, vitamin B12, which is vital for energy, a healthy brain, and detoxification. This is essential for heart health. Studies suggest people who are deficient in this vitamin risk having elevated levels of homocysteine. High blood levels of homocysteine have been linked to an increased risk of heart disease. Therefore, ensuring you have adequate vitamin B12 intake could be helpful to prevent heart disease. Beneficial fats such as omega-DHA. EPA is important for reducing inflammation, and DHA has been found to be beneficial for high blood pressure. Preformed vitamin A. Additionally, animal products are a higher source of iron, zinc and vitamin B2, riboflavin. Further to this, for people who don't eat meat and live far away from the equator, during the cooler months deficiency in vitamin D can be a big problem. This is because the body creates vitamin D when exposed to adequate sunlight. However, during winter where sunlight doesn't provide enough, animal products can be a good source. Recent research has shown that lower levels of vitamin D are associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. According to Hopkins Medicine, vitamin D deficiency is a risk factor for heart attacks, congestive heart failure, and stroke. Peripheral arterial disease, PAD, strokes, and the conditions associated with cardiovascular disease, such as high blood pressure and diabetes. Meat is also a great source of protein. Protein is made up of amino acids, which all play an important role in health and preventing chronic diseases such as atherosclerosis. For example, taurine, an essential nutrient for heart health. Also carnosine, which is made from the binding together of amino acids. This is an antioxidant that offers protection from diseases and improves athletic performance. It also prevents glycation from sugar. This is critical for avoiding heart disease, as glycated cells can damage arteries and increase risk of heart attacks. Red meat is also a source of antioxidants, such as vitamin A and CoQ10. 2 examples are coenzyme Q10, also known as CoQ10, and retinol, which is preformed vitamin A. However, CoQ10 is vital for heart health. Dr. Stephen Sinatra was one of the first cardiologists to recognize the healing power of CoQ10 for the heart. In the same way that a gasoline engine can't work without spark plugs, our body can't work without CoQ10. A CoQ10 deficiency can have catastrophic effects on the heart. Therefore, it's important that we get it from our diet. The only place we can get significant amounts of this enzyme is from animal products, especially organ meats such as heart and liver. As you can see, eating meat is helpful for getting nutrients that keep our cardiovascular system healthy. However, are there certain types of meat we shouldn't eat? We're going to learn about some important things to avoid when eating meat in just a second. When choosing meat, it's important to note that the majority of the meat consumed in America is feedlot raised from factory farms. The animals have been loaded with antibiotics, steroids and hormones, and fed the equivalent of a processed food diet. Therefore, their meat can be high in inflammatory fats, such as omega-6, and provide little omega-3. However, grass-fed organic meat is a different story. It has been raised organically without hormones, steroids, and antibiotics. It contains a much better ratio of omega-3 to 6 fat. A 2010 review compared grass-fed animals to grain-fed. It found that grass-fed animals had higher levels of heart-healthy omega-3 fats. Numerous studies also suggest that cows on grass-fed diets have elevated precursors for vitamins A and E, plus antioxidants such as glutathione and superoxide dismutase activity in comparison to cows fed grains. As you can see, the way the cow is fed and nurtured is an important factor to consider when eating meat. But are there other factors to consider when it comes to eating meat? This leads me back to the humble hamburger. If made from grass-fed, organic meat, the burger itself could be highly nutritious. However, you also have to take into account the way it's been cooked. Meat that is cooked on a super high heat is less nutritious than one cooked slowly on low heat. When meat is cooked slowly, it retains its nutrients and is easier for our body to digest. Plus, high temperature cooking, grilling, roasting or broiling can increase your chances of developing hypertension. One study looked at over 100,000 people for 12 to 16 years. It concluded that those who cooked animal proteins at higher temperatures were more likely to develop high blood pressure. Another aspect to consider when cooking meat is the oil used. Most burgers are cooked using cheap vegetable oil. For years, these types of oil have been marketed as heart healthy. However, these oils are a wholly modern convention, popularized in the 20th century as a low-cost alternative for animal fats. They've quickly risen to comprise the majority of the fat we eat. But rather than promote heart health, we've seen quite the opposite. This linoleic acid, an omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid. This fatty acid is unstable and prone to oxidative damage when exposed to heat. Consuming these types of fatty acids can increase inflammation, thus being problematic for our cardiovascular system. As you can see, hamburgers that have been cooked on a low heat without toxic vegetable oils and made from clean meats can be highly nutritious. But what about the things we eat with our hamburgers? Most hamburgers are eaten with a bread bun and added sauce. Both of these can be problematic. Eating flour-based products, such as bread, can cause a rapid elevation of blood sugar. Plus many sauces, such as barbecue and tomato, are very high in sugar. When you have high blood sugar, this can create a process called glycation. Glycation is when sugar attaches itself to proteins and fats in your blood. This can create sticky blood cells which can't flow easily. When blood can't flow well, it can cause an elevation in blood pressure. Further to this, the glycated cells can result in a plaque buildup in our arteries. These plaques can eventually cause heart attacks and strokes. Removing grains from the diet can be hugely beneficial for reducing cardiovascular risk factors, as a 2009 study indicated. The study divided the participants into a paleo diet group versus diabetic diet. The diabetic diet group ate low-fat and increased whole grains, whereas the paleo group avoided grains, processed sugars, legumes and dairy. Interestingly, the paleo group had improved blood sugars, triglycerides, HDL good cholesterol, blood pressure, as well as losing weight and reducing their waist circumference. So if you want to enjoy a burger, then be sure to source grass-fed meat, cook it on a low heat, avoid using vegetable oils, instead opt for extra virgin olive oil when cooking. Be sure to eat it with lots of vegetables. Plus leave out the breads and sauces and your heart will thank you for it. So there you have the facts on hamburgers and how they can help prevent heart attacks. Make sure to stay tuned to my channel to discover more wonderful nutrition and wellness insights. Have a heart-healthy day.